Hi, and I'm Martin Mulcare. Welcome to this episode of We Are Actuaries. I'm playing guest host, and today I have the pleasure of chatting with Helen Rowell. Welcome, Helen.
Thanks, Martin. It's a pleasure to be here.
So today we're going to talk about leadership, specifically your role as leader of a profession. But perhaps for context for the audience, you've got a very impressive CV with leadership roles. What do you think the audience would like to know about your leadership experience?
Thanks, Martin. I think I'd probably put my leadership experience into sort of two key buckets. One would be as a leader at APRA, and that
Mm,
was obviously a significant role over a number of years. And I would like to think played a fairly material role in enhancing standards of practice across the super sector in particular, but more broadly. As Deputy Chair of APRA, you had a lot of responsibility across all sectors, although my specific focus area was a little bit more in the insurance and superannuation, particularly superannuation space. So, I was at APRA for 20 years, the last 10 basically as APRA member deputy chair. And that was, I think, a very privileged role, but it also meant that I had to be a really strong leader, I guess, both within APRA, but also externally in terms of setting the standards and expectations. I think the other important leadership roles I've had have actually been international roles. And so throughout my career, I was very active in the International Actuarial Association, the International Association of Insurance Supervisors, and the International Organisation of Pension Supervisors. And that was really there contributing to leadership in the international regulatory and actuarial fields and demonstrating where, in many respects, Australia was ahead and leading in its practices and its standards in many of those sectors. And so that was, again, a pretty interesting and important leadership role.
sure. And you mentioned international, one fascinating dimension of leadership, but also for our international audience, Helen mentioned APRA. If you're not familiar with that, Australian Prudential Regulatory Authority, deputy chair like that is a seriously big deal. So let's go back in time. What was your business role at the time that you were first elected to council on the Australian Actuaries Institute?
So at the time I was elected to council, I was actually working at Towers Perrin, which was an actuarial employee benefits consulting firm. And so I was a consultant and then a partner in Towers Perrin, basically providing advice to clients around particularly issues related to employee benefits. But then when I was actually stepping into the president role in early 2002, that was when I moved to APRA. And so I'd moved out of employee benefits consulting into a technical specialist role at APRA, actually leading a team that was responsible for the implementation and interpretation of all of APRA's prudential standards. And that was at the time that the major post-HIH general insurance reforms were occurring. So it was pretty interesting. It was pretty new territory for me. And as I said, I was also taking on the president role. So 2002 was a pretty busy year.
So that's important again for the audience that at a time you're taking on the role of president, you've got a seriously demanding role. So what motivated you to take on the role of president of the Actuaries Institute?
So I'd been pretty active in the Actuaries Institute over a number of years. I, I had contributed in, education, in policy on the Superannuation Practice Committee and in a number of other areas. And I just felt that by being on council, I could sort of take my contribution to the next level. I have always been, and my choices throughout my career have always been very purpose and values driven. And a big part of me moving to APRA was actually to have more impact on improving standards of practice across the financial services sector and improving outcomes for Australians. And I guess being on council and being ultimately president of the Actuaries Institute, kind of went hand in hand with that in terms of really just how can I have some influence and exercise some leadership to really improve the way the sector operates and the way the profession operates
Yeah.
and delivers good outcomes. So it was all about that influence and impact really and aligned with my purpose and values.
Okay. Yeah, that sense of purpose comes through even with you recounting it now.
Yeah.
So besides purpose, then, um, what leadership skills do you recall being required in your presidential year?
So in a lot of ways, the role of president of the Actuaries Institute is very similar to being the chair of a board. And so you need all of those chair skills, which is all about how do you manage the relationship between the council or the board and the executives? How do you make sure that the board is fulfilling its role of sort of strategic oversight and execution of the plans that you've set in place? There's that strong sort of governance discipline around the council and how you make the council itself work effectively. It was about, giving consideration to succession planning, understanding the stakeholder map, and that there canvassed everything from, the members of the Actuaries Institute to all of the stakeholders
Mm.
that actuaries engage with, whether it was regulators, the policymakers, the wider sector. How do we understand that stakeholder expectation and engage effectively with those stakeholders? And so that then requires good communication skills and being able
Yeah.
to communicate and influence effectively both with the membership but also externally with stakeholders, most of whom are not actuaries. So they're the sort of the general characteristics. And then if I think about the ones that are more specific to the role of the Actuaries Institute and the profession, it is about being able to understand and think strategically about what members' expectations are of
Mm.
the Actuaries Institute. How do we support members through their education? How do we set appropriate standards? How do we engage with regulators to influence policy in a way that is appropriate and
Yeah.
adds value for the community? Um, to do that as president and on council, you needed to understand all of the areas and sectors to a degree in which actuaries operate. And
Mm.
so that means actually really thinking outside of your own practice area and skills base and becoming familiar with the issues and the practices in other sectors.
Yeah.
My APRA role was a little bit helpful there because I was obviously getting insights into other practice areas. And then the final thing, I think, and this has been evident for the profession over many, many years now, is the world in which we operate, in which actuaries operate, keeps changing. And the skills and experience that you need to be effective and add value as an actuary keeps changing. And so part of council's role is to be thinking about that and how you evolve the education and the CPD and the stakeholder engagement to make sure that you're advocating for actuaries and making sure that actuaries stay relevant and able to add value in an ever-changing world.
Wow. So that's a fascinating and diverse set of skills. And just thinking about the audience, especially if they're in a corporate environment, some of those skills, like communication, stakeholders, would be familiar to leaders in corporate roles. But some of them, like those chair-like responsibilities, or tapping into and understanding expectations of members, they're very different skills to what might be required from a corporate leader. So, did you learn them on the job? Did you do some prep? How did you come to, maybe master is testing your humility, but how did you come to really exercise those skills?
I think my background as a consultant probably helped
Yeah, yeah,
because we were dealing with lots of different organizations and employers. And so we had to be able to understand and communicate with members, employers across different industries and sectors. I think also being involved through the Institute's education programs and, doing
yeah.
tutoring and writing courses and things, you got to understand a little bit about the students, and so that experience was helpful. And then I think the stakeholder engagement, again, by being involved through the Institute on its practice committee and engaging with politicians and other stakeholders around policy issues, regulation, etc., meant that I had that diverse background of needing to be able to communicate and engage with and understand perspectives from a wide range of stakeholders, which I think helped me then continue that and carry that into the role on council and as president.
All right, that's really interesting, just the way that you've thought about the existing skills and how to adapt them to that role. Fascinating. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things, Martin, just to digress a little
you
bit here,
may,
that,
please.
I try and give people advice, when people say about sort of career changes and what have you, it's really important to think about the skills and experience that you have, not the job that you've done,
Yeah.
and how you can apply those skills and experience in different ways in different roles, because that's the key.
Yeah, nice hint for the audience. So let me just pick up a couple of particular skills that you've highlighted. So one you talked about being really conscious of the evolution of the profession, the evolution of actuaries. So you've got to look forward, don't you, as
Mm,
president? So tell me about this, what I'll call, this vision thing and the
mm.
importance of vision for leaders generally, but specifically leading a profession.
Yeah, look, I think it's critical. I mean, a vision and being able to communicate that vision and galvanize people behind that vision is important in any organization. But I think as a profession, where you want actuaries to be able to continue to add value in organizations and to society more broadly, you need to keep thinking about how that society and
Yeah,
organizations are evolving, and the ways in which the actuarial skill set can be used to kind of help with that. And, at their core, actuaries are effective at solving really complex problems, multi-dimensional, multi-stakeholder
yeah.
problems, and doing that robustly, but they also need to be able to then communicate that. And so as the financial sector has evolved over the years, as the areas in which actuaries can and perhaps could add value continues to
Yeah.
change, the council and the president really need to be thinking about, what do we want actuaries to be known for? How do we want them to be viewed? And how do we then position the education program, the CPD, the engagement around that in a way that really sort of pushes that. So that means being very clear, and you can see that in some of the messaging and the sort of taglines that the Institute now uses, and the way we promote the profession, which is all about thinking forward and really being clear about that vision and that message that actuaries are relevant in the world today and will continue to be in the world tomorrow and in the future, and find different ways to be able to communicate that.
Okay. Well, you've made a very compelling case for the role of actuaries and also how that might be communicated,
I, th
evolving
I
over
mean, I
time.
think the other important angle of that, Martin, is we have to actually bring the profession itself on that journey.
Yeah.
And so, communication internally with the profession about what we can and should do, how we need to evolve as a profession
Yeah.
is an important part of that as well. It's not just about talking to external stakeholders.
I've got a question about leadership skills required in 2026. I might come back to that theme when we do that one. So the other one that I wanted to pick up, you mentioned right at the beginning that your career choices and in fact the choice to become president, was very aligned with the importance of purpose and values to you. So tell me a bit more about values and the importance of that in playing leader, especially leader of a profession.
So I think authenticity and being true to yourself is absolutely essential to be an effective leader. If if you can't be true to your values in the role and the leadership role that you're undertaking, for me personally, I cannot put myself in that position. I would not be able to operate as a leader in that position. And so I think it is really important that you understand what values are important to you. And, for me, it is around integrity and contribution and connectivity with others and collaboration and all of those things which go to, I know it sounds trite, but it's about making the world a better place
Sure.
for people. And so I need to find leadership roles that allow me to do that in organisations that have aligned values. And
Yep.
so I do think that if you haven't got that alignment of values in the leadership roles that you're undertaking, it's pretty hard to be an effective leader because
Okay.
people spot inauthentic behaviour very, very quickly.
Yeah, so some key lessons there around authenticity, but also alignment. I also like the way you directly linked your values to that sense of purpose as well. So you've taken us through a range, diverse and some demanding skills that you felt were important in your role as leading the profession. So that's a little while ago now. In the world of 2026, what might be different in terms of skills required for a president in 2026, or are you a believer that those core things remain the same over time?
I do actually think a lot of the core leadership skills and attributes
Yep.
remain true over time, and that the ability to communicate a vision, to galvanize people, to have that authentic leadership, to be able to effectively manage diverse groups of people
Mhm.
effectively, those things stay true.
Yeah.
What changes is the issues that you're dealing with, and I think if I think about 2002 to now, the world is a far more complex place. It's a far more uncertain place. There's a lot more noise that you have to navigate through to make decisions and to be able to communicate effectively. And so um, I think the way you communicate and the channels and approaches to communicate effectively are probably a little bit different now to what they were back in 2002, and use of social media and other ways to kind of get your particular messages and values and visions cut through both within an organization and externally is a little bit different. I also think, given the complexity and the shifts in the financial sector and the interaction with other issues like climate change
Mhm.
and
Mm.
cyber and all of those sorts of things, the importance of cross-disciplinary
Yep.
collaboration
Yep.
is
Yep.
probably more important now than it might have been back in, the 1990s, when actuaries were in more traditional roles where they could operate within their narrow sector and didn't necessarily have to sort of engage as broadly
Right.
as is needed now.
Okay. Yeah, that's very insightful. I probably would have thought about the greater noise now, but I hadn't thought about the importance that you've just highlighted of the cross-practice area,
Mm,
cross-discipline collaboration. Yeah,
yeah,
interesting. So
yeah.
let's go back to your presidential year. I'm just interested, with a passage of time, what was surprising, in that affecting in delivering that role? What was different to what you expected?
Um, I, I think a lot of it was sort of as I expected in terms of the breadth and the sort of range of issues and the range of stakeholders that you needed to deal with was pretty expected, and really part of why I wanted to do it was because I enjoyed that sort of complexity and breadth. I think what surprised me at the time, and it was a time of change in sort of financial sector regulation, expectations on actuaries and the like, was um, the pockets of resistance to change and a bit of a sort of a backward-looking traditional focus in some segments of the profession, and so the need to get the profession to be more forward-looking and more open to change and open to some of the things that regulators were trying to do.
Yeah.
Um, it it was quite an effort at times for the institute, whilst it was, engaging on policy with regulators or, doing its professional standards, to sort of get that alignment across the industry as to why there was a need for change and the benefits of that change and perhaps doing things differently.
Yep.
I think the other surprising element for me was that international angle and the fact that, and again, it's a sort of a phrase that's used often, Australia was really punching above its weight in international circles. And that was a really pleasant surprise for me to go into those international forums and see that whether it was an actuarial forum or a regulator forum or whatever, they were looking to Australia for good practice, better practice, and for how the profession had evolved and was sort of getting into risk management and other areas at the time, which was a little bit ahead of other professions or other countries.
Okay, interesting. And without going into history too much, I think we probably underestimate just how important you've already mentioned HIH, that the fallout of that in terms of the things we've talked about, regulation, role of the profession, that all of that must have been a significant part of that change, or perhaps as you also had, resistance to change
Mm,
that was
mm.
required at the time.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And I know it can make people uncomfortable to kind of
Yeah,
step out of their comfort zone and do something they haven't done before and get into new areas. But I mean, the particular example I'm thinking about was actuaries having to comment on risk management in their financial condition
yeah,
reports, and there was a lot of discussion at the time. It was like, we can't do that. That's not our. It was like, actually, you can,
yeah,
and you
yeah,
need to.
yeah. And of course, now it's like, well, why was there even a worry? Yeah,
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
All right, well, let's just tap into your vision thing, if I may, Helen. Looking forward, uh, your perspective on the future of the profession from a 2026
Yeah.
perspective.
Look, I'm pretty optimistic about the future of the actuarial profession, both in Australia and probably internationally. And I think it's because of the way the profession has adapted and changed over the years to remain relevant. And the fact that we've seen actuaries getting out into different areas and
Mm,
really contributing significantly to policy, to industry evolution, to solving different problems outside of what might be regarded as the traditional actuarial areas. And so I can see no reason why that wouldn't continue. And I think the openness to engaging with others in other disciplines to really bring together what's needed to solve some of the complex societal problems that we're facing, whether it's kind of funding aged care or health care or whatever it is.
yeah,
I think there are tremendous opportunities for actuaries into the future, and we just need to keep evolving our education and our professional practices and the way we think of our skills and our experience, and being able to apply them and keep getting that message through that actuaries are valuable partners in
yeah,
solving really complex problems.
yeah. Nice wrap. And I have been accused of being an optimist as well, so I can certainly resonate with the positive perspective that you've just provided. So you've shared a lot of wisdom today, Helen, and I'm very appreciative of that. One final question for the audience. What's your one top tip for actuaries who are aspiring to leadership roles?
So I'm going to cheat and I'm going to have two.
Oh, you may, you may.
My first one is actually you need to keep learning. You need to be open-minded. You need to keep thinking outside of your day-to-day work to understand, how the wider context in which you're operating is changing and how you stay relevant and add value in that wider context. So that's the kind of a continuous learning kind of angle. And then I think it's about communication and building connection and understanding.
Okay,
And again, to be able to add value in whatever role you're undertaking, you need to really be able to listen and understand the perspectives of others, try and sort of, join the dots and help navigate, particularly because there are lots of different views on all sorts of issues. A key leadership skill is being able to sort of listen and understand those different views and then kind of build consensus and shared understanding so that you can actually find a way forward to solve whatever problem it is that you're dealing with.
okay. All right, and because you've given me two now, I have to delve a little. Which of those do you think is the most challenging to learn and apply?
It probably varies for different people. I think, some people are naturally more open-minded and curious than others.
Yeah,
And so it might take a little bit more of a push for some people to sort of, or they might say they're too busy, so they struggle to find the time to sort of build that wider context and understanding. And similarly, communication
Mm.
varies across the board too. And you know, I mean, I'm actually a natural introvert, and so you know, I have to go out of my comfort zone almost every day to do that communication and engagement piece. And so some people find that very hard
Yeah,
to
yeah,
do,
true.
but you can do it if you're committed to it.
Okay, and that's probably the line, isn't it? So, Helen, thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate sharing your experience and your insights with it, and I'm sure it was very valuable for the audience. So, thank you very much.
My pleasure, Martin. It's been great to chat.
Bye.